I was sitting on the couch on a quiet Thursday night, my legs tucked under me, laptop balanced on my knees, answering work emails I should have stopped an hour earlier. The apartment was calm in that familiar way, low lights, the hum of the fridge, the soft illusion that this was what stability felt like. Then my boyfriend sat down beside me. Not close, just beside. I didn't look up at first, but I felt it. That shift in the air, the pause that comes before something heavy lands. He had that look on his face, the one people get when they've rehearsed a sentence so many times it's lost all warmth. "Babe," he said, reaching for my hand. His fingers were cold. "We need to talk about our future." I closed my laptop and turned toward him, forcing a small smile. "Okay, what's going on?" He took a deep breath, like he was the one about to make a sacrifice. "If we're really serious about building a life together, marriage, a bigger place, maybe kids one day, we need to deal with my student loans. They're holding us back." That alone didn't scare me. We'd talked about his loans before. He'd told me they were around $35,000 from his MBA. Not great, but not unmanageable. We were partners. This was adult life. "So what's the plan?" I asked. "Refinancing? Consolidation? Let's look at the paperwork and—" He squeezed my hand harder. "No," he said softly. "If you really loved me, you'd just pay them off." The words landed wrong. Too clean. Too practiced. I blinked. My heart skipped, then sped up, like it was trying to warn me before my brain caught up. I made good money in consulting. Comfortable, not reckless. $35,000 wasn't a gesture. It was a life decision. "I'm not saying no," I said carefully. "I just want to see the paperwork, understand the details." His expression changed instantly. The warmth vanished. "Why do you need paperwork?" he snapped. "Don't you trust me?" And there it was, the first crack. Because love, apparently, meant blind obedience. Love meant not asking questions. Love meant proving myself with my bank account. When he stood up and walked away, slamming the bedroom door behind him, my hands were shaking. Not from anger, from instinct. Something about this didn't add up. And for the first time in nearly 3 years, I wondered if the life I thought we were building was already built on a lie. You don't threaten someone's future if you're telling the truth. And I was about to find out just how deep that lie went. I met him almost 3 years earlier at a friend's casual dinner that was supposed to be forgettable. Paper plates, cheap wine, conversations that drifted in circles. I hadn't planned on staying long. Neither had he. We ended up standing on the balcony, shoulder to shoulder, talking about nothing important and everything that felt revealing in hindsight. Work frustrations, long hours, the quiet pressure to look like we had our lives figured out. He listened in a way that felt rare, not interrupting, not correcting, just nodding, asking the right questions at the right time. He told me about his MBA, about how hard he'd worked for it, about the debt, yes, but also about the ambition behind it. He wanted more, stability, respect, a future that looked impressive on paper. I admired that. Back then, I was drawn to his confidence, the way he spoke like someone who knew where he was going, even if he hadn't arrived yet. He made me feel steady, like I could exhale around him, like I wasn't carrying the weight alone. We took things slow. At least it felt that way at the time. Dinners turned into weekends. Weekends turned into toothbrushes left behind. Within a year and a half, we were living together in my condo. It made sense. I already owned the place. He moved in with a few boxes and a lot of gratitude. We split things in a way that felt fair. Groceries down the middle. He covered utilities. I handled the mortgage. No drama, no tension. It felt adult, balanced. Or so I thought. Looking back, the signs were there, small enough to ignore if you wanted to believe the best in someone. He was always between things financially. Not struggling, exactly. Just tight. There was always a reason. Tuition costs, career investments, helping a friend out, temporary situations that somehow never resolved. Every now and then, he'd ask if I could spot him cash. Nothing huge, a few hundred here, an emergency there. He always promised to pay me back. He never did, but he always had a story. I didn't push. I didn't want to be that girlfriend, the one who kept score. Love, I believed, wasn't transactional. What I didn't realize was that someone else was keeping score. There were other things, too. Packages that arrived and disappeared quickly. Withdrawals that didn't line up with his explanations. A strange defensiveness whenever money came up, like the subject itself offended him. And then there was his ex. He claimed she was ancient history, a painful chapter from before we met, someone who just didn't get him. Yet her name surfaced during arguments, usually as a comparison. She understood me better. She wouldn't make this a big deal. She trusted me. I told myself it was just emotional immaturity, old wounds, nothing more. But love makes you generous with excuses. I thought we were building something real, a shared life, a future that made sense because it was grounded in honesty. That night on the couch, when he asked me to pay off his loans without even letting me see the paperwork, something shifted. Because suddenly, our past didn't feel like a foundation. It felt like a setup, and I realized I might not actually know the man sleeping in my bed. The morning after the argument, he acted like nothing had happened. I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of a pan heating on the stove. He was humming, like the night before hadn't ended with a slammed door and my heart racing in the dark. "Morning," he said lightly, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I froze for half a second before forcing myself to respond. His lips were warm, familiar. That almost made it worse. He plated eggs, slid a mug toward me, talked about traffic and meetings and some coworker drama I barely listened to. I watched his hands as he moved around the kitchen, confident, practiced, completely unbothered. No apology, no follow-up, no acknowledgement that he'd asked me to prove my love with a check. That silence wasn't peace, it was strategy. I smiled when I needed to, nodded, played my part. But inside, something had clicked into place, a quiet, uncomfortable awareness that refused to leave. Over the next few days, I paid attention in a way I hadn't before. When he asked for cash, just until Friday, I noticed how easily the request rolled off his tongue. When he brushed off my questions with jokes or irritation, I noticed how fast he redirected the conversation. When another package arrived and disappeared without explanation, I noticed how quickly he changed the subject. And then there were the withdrawals. I wasn't snooping, at least not at first, but I handled most of our shared logistics. I saw the patterns. Every month, right around the middle, a few $100s would vanish. Always explained, never detailed. "It's complicated. I'll tell you later." Why does it matter? It mattered because it didn't add up. I tried once more to bring it up calmly. "About the loans," I said one evening, keeping my voice steady. "I'm still open to helping. I just need transparency." His jaw tightened. "You're really stuck on this," he said. "I thought you trusted me." "I do," I replied. "That's why I want us to look at it together." He laughed, short, sharp. "This is exactly what my friend warned me about. You make everything a transaction." There it was again, the reframing. Suddenly, I was the problem. That night, I lay awake listening to his breathing, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts looping in tight, anxious circles. Trust wasn't supposed to feel like this. Love wasn't supposed to require silence. So I did something I'd never done before. I asked for help. A colleague, someone who'd been through a brutal divorce, mentioned a forensic accountant once. At the time, I'd barely listened. Now, the memory sat heavy in my chest. It felt extreme, paranoid even. But I wasn't trying to catch him in a lie. I was trying to protect myself. I made the call the next day. The fee made my stomach flip, but not as much as the alternative, handing over tens of thousands of dollars on blind faith. I gave the accountant what I had, a name, a school, rough dates, and the claim that there were $35,000 in student loans. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. Not with guilt, with clarity. Because if everything he'd said was true, the paperwork would confirm it. And if it wasn't, then this wasn't just about money. It was about manipulation. And I was done pretending I couldn't feel it. 3 days later, my phone rang in the middle of a work meeting. I stared at the screen when I saw the number, my pulse spiking before I even answered. I excused myself, stepped into an empty conference room, and closed the door behind me. "This is Bradley," the forensic accountant said. His voice was calm, too calm. "You might want to sit down." I did. "Okay," I said slowly. "Just tell me." There was a brief pause, the sound of paper shifting on his end. "Your boyfriend does have student loans, but not $35,000. My shoulders loosened just a fraction. "How much?" $8,700. I blinked. That's it?" "Yes, and they've been in minimum payment mode for years, which is why the balance hasn't moved much." For a split second, relief tried to surface. Then he continued. "But there's another loan, a car loan, $26,000. The room seemed to tilt. "A BMW, he said. "Taken out 4 years ago." I swallowed. "That doesn't make sense. He doesn't own a BMW." "He doesn't," Bradley replied. "But he's the primary borrower. The registered owner is his ex-girlfriend." The words didn't land all at once. They came in pieces, sharp, disorienting fragments that cut deeper the longer they settled. "He's been paying for her car?" I asked, my voice barely there. Not exactly, Bradley said. He's been paying some of it. The rest, based on bank records and withdrawal patterns, that money came from you. I felt nauseous. Bradley kept going, methodical, relentless. The loan was taken out 2 months before they supposedly broke up. The ex wasn't even a co-signer. The car was still registered in her name. Insurance claims, 2 of them, filed by her. And the withdrawals, every month around the 15th. $500 to $600 in cash. The car payment hit on the 20th. My chest tightened. Those emergencies. The promises to pay me back. The casual way he'd framed it as temporary. I thanked Bradley, hung up, and sat there in silence, my hands gripping the edge of the table as my heartbeat thundered in my ears. By the time I drove home, the sky was already dark. He was there, on the couch, with his friend, laughing over a phone screen, wine glasses half empty on the table. The sound of their laughter stopped the moment I walked in. "You're home early," he said. "Too quickly." "We need to talk," I replied, alone. His friend rolled her eyes. "Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of me." "No," I said flatly, "you really can't." After a tense beat, she left, shooting me a look like I'd just committed a crime. I didn't sit down. I didn't ease into it. "I know about the BMW," I said. His face drained of color, then flushed. Then the tears came, fast, dramatic, like a switch had been flipped. "You investigated me?" he cried. "How could you?" "You asked me for $35,000, I said, my voice steady despite the shaking in my hands. "You lied about what it was for." "It's not like that," he sobbed. "She manipulated me, threatened my credit. I had no choice." "You had a choice," I said. "You could have told me the truth." "You wouldn't have understood," he snapped, the tears stopping just as suddenly. "You're so practical about everything. She gets me emotionally." The room went silent. "She," I repeated softly. He froze. "We're just friends," he said quickly. I pulled out my phone, showed him the screenshot Bradley had found. His ex's social media post, the BMW in the background. The caption thanking her ride or die. He lunged for the phone. I pulled it back. "Stop," I said. "Just stop." I felt something inside me harden into clarity. "You've been paying for your ex's car while living in my home, eating food I pay for, taking my money under false pretenses, and then you tried to guilt me into paying off the rest." "I love you," he wailed. "She means nothing." "Then she can start paying for her own car," I said. "You need to leave." His expression twisted, anger replacing panic. "You can't kick me out. I live here." "You're not on the lease," I replied. "Pack your things." He called me controlling, cheap, abusive. Then he called his friend, who showed up within minutes, acting like she was rescuing a victim. As they loaded his things into her car, he turned back one last time. "She was right about you," he sneered. "You're heartless." I met his eyes. "Good," I said quietly, "because your ex can't afford a heart. She needs a bank." The door closed behind them with a sound that felt final, but not quiet. The apartment fell into a strange stillness, like the air itself was holding its breath. Empty wine glasses sat on the coffee table. One of his shoes was still by the door, forgotten in the rush. I stared at it longer than I should have, my mind struggling to accept how quickly a shared life could unravel. My hands were shaking. Not the dramatic kind, the subtle kind that creeps up from your wrists and settles into your fingers, making it hard to do simple things, like pour a glass of water without spilling it. I sank onto the couch and let myself breathe for the first time all evening. 3 years. That's how long I'd loved him, trusted him, built routines around him, planned my future with him in small, quiet ways, assuming he was doing the same. I wasn't crying. Not yet. I felt hollow, like someone had reached inside me and scooped something essential out, leaving behind questions that echoed too loudly in my head. How many times had I defended him? How many times had I told myself I was overthinking? How often had I chosen peace over clarity? My phone buzzed. A text. "I didn't mean what I said. Please talk to me." Then another. "You blindsided me. That wasn't fair." Then another. "You humiliated me in front of her." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering, my heart pounding like it wanted me to respond. Explain myself, soften the blow, make it easier for him to understand. I didn't. Instead, I opened my settings and blocked his number. The silence that followed was deafening. An hour later, my inbox lit up. Emails, long ones, emotional ones, subject lines swinging wildly from, "I love you," to, "You're destroying my life." He accused me of betrayal, of snooping, of turning a financial issue into a moral failing. I forwarded every single one to a folder I labeled documentation. Then I blocked that address too. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next morning, I woke to a pounding headache and the weight of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. My chest felt tight, like my body was still bracing for impact. By noon, he'd found a new way to reach me. Work email. Urgent relationship emergency. I didn't even open it. I forwarded it to myself, flagged it, and blocked him again. My hands were steady this time. That afternoon, an unknown number called. I almost ignored it. Something told me not to. Hey, a male voice said, casual, confident. We need to talk. I knew who it was instantly. No, I replied, we don't. Look, whatever he told you about the car. He didn't tell me anything, I cut in. I found out myself. There was a pause, then a laugh, sharp, dismissive. You don't understand. He owes me that car. Owes you? I echoed. For what? For being there for him emotionally, he snapped. During a rough time. I laughed. I couldn't help it. I honestly don't care, I said. He's not my problem anymore, which means you definitely aren't either. You can't just, he started. I hung up. My heart was racing, but this time it wasn't fear. It was resolve. By the end of the day, I'd changed my passwords, put a credit freeze in place, documented everything. I moved through my apartment like someone reclaiming territory, packing away reminders, clearing space, grounding myself in what was real. That night, lying alone in my bed, I finally cried. Not for him, for myself, for the version of me that had trusted too easily, that had been generous without protection, that had mistaken manipulation for vulnerability. But beneath the grief, something else stirred. Anger, not explosive, focused. And I knew deep down that this wasn't over. Because men like him don't let go when the money stops. They escalate. The escalation didn't come with drama at first. It came with persistence. The morning after I blocked him everywhere, my phone stayed quiet, but my inbox didn't. New email, new address, same tone. You cut me off without warning. You're overreacting. You owe me a conversation. I didn't reply. By midday, security called my office. There's a man in the lobby asking for you, the receptionist said carefully. He claims he's your fiancé. My stomach dropped, not from fear, but from disbelief. I don't know anyone by that name, I said. Please have him escorted out. From my desk, I could see the lobby through the glass. I watched him argue with security, his hands moving too fast, his voice sharp enough that heads started turning. When they finally walked him out, he twisted around once, scanning the floor like he could will me into view. I didn't move. My manager pulled me aside afterward. I explained, briefly, calmly. He listened, nodded, and suggested I start documenting everything in case I needed a restraining order. That word sat heavy in my chest. Restraining order. That evening, it got worse. My phone rang. My mother's name lit up the screen. Sweetheart, she said, and I could hear the doubt already forming. What's going on with you and that poor boy? I closed my eyes. He'd found her. Somehow, through social media, through mutuals, through sheer audacity, he'd sent her a long message. Pages of it. Accusations layered with fake screenshots. Claims that I'd promised marriage, controlled his finances, forced him to pay for everything while hoarding my money. He painted himself as abandoned, homeless, betrayed. I spent 2 hours on the phone with my mother, walking her through the truth, showing her real bank records, real timestamps, real evidence. When she finally understood, her voice hardened. The nerve, she said, using his ex's car to manipulate you and then trying to turn me against my own daughter. I hung up exhausted, but vindicated. That night, around 11, my credit monitoring app pinged. New credit application detected. My heart slammed into my ribs. Someone had tried to open a credit card in my name. I called the fraud department immediately. They flagged it, canceled the application, and advised a full credit freeze. Guess who knew my social security number? The man who'd helped me with tax paperwork. I barely slept. The next morning, another email arrived. Not from him, from his friend. Subject, you need to fix this. She accused me of abandoning him financially, claimed he couldn't pay his share of anything now that I'd cut him off, threatened bankruptcy, claimed he was considering legal action, palimony, she called it, because we'd basically been married. She ended with a familiar line. A real woman would take care of her partner's problems without questioning them. I forwarded the email to my lawyer friend. His reply came back in under 5 minutes. LOL. Palimony isn't recognized here. Let them try. But she'd made a mistake. She'd sent the email from her work account. Full signature, company name, title. She worked in HR at a financial services firm, using company resources to threaten baseless legal action. I forwarded the email to her company's ethics hotline. Then I did one more thing. I called Bradley, asked him to dig deeper, not into my ex, but into the woman he'd been paying for all along. What came back was worse than I expected. Multiple debts, collections, evictions, a small claims case from a former roommate, a pattern, a trail. I packaged everything neatly and sent it to my ex's email. Subject line, your ride or die has a lot of dying to do. Then I made one final call to the dealership where the BMW loan originated. Explained the situation. I couldn't force action, but the finance manager said something that made my pulse slow. If the payments stop and it goes into repo, he said, we'll be very interested in the vehicle's location. I knew exactly where it was parked. By the end of the week, the narrative had flipped. I wasn't defending myself anymore. I was watching consequences line up. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, I realized something important. I wasn't reacting. I was reclaiming control. The call came just after dawn. I was standing in my kitchen, staring at the sink without really seeing it, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. My body was tired in a way sleep couldn't touch. Every nerve felt raw, overexposed. Something told me to answer. He didn't bother with hello. You did this, he hissed. You ruined everything. I leaned against the counter, the cool stone pressing into my spine. What happened? A harsh laugh. Don't play dumb, she missed the payment. My chest tightened, not with guilt, but with understanding. The BMW. She tried to scrape together cash, he continued, voice rising. Showed up at my place while they were already loading the car, screaming, crying. I've never seen her like that. I closed my eyes. The image came anyway, her standing there, hands shaking, the polished life she'd been propping up collapsing in real time. The sound of metal chains, neighbors watching, phones lifted. She didn't have enough, he said bitterly. They told her she needed almost 2,000 plus fees to get it back. I imagined the moment it finally hit her. Not emotionally, financially. The kind of clarity that doesn't care how you feel, only what's real. And you know what she said? He went on. She blamed you. I exhaled slowly. Of course she did. She said you poisoned her against me, that you're jealous, that you're vindictive. And silence, then quieter, then I lost it. He told me what happened next in pieces, how he'd screamed at her in front of everyone, how he called her useless, pathetic, how he spat the words that finally broke the illusion. You couldn't even keep your rich girlfriend paying for my car. I felt something crack in my chest. Not sympathy, recognition, because that was the moment she finally saw it. Not as a story, not as a feeling, but as truth. She wasn't loved. She was a payment plan. The call ended abruptly. I stood there for a long time after, my heart pounding, my hands gripping the edge of the counter as if the ground beneath me might shift again. That day passed in a haze. Videos surfaced online. Grainy footage filmed by neighbors. The argument. The repo truck. The caption, someone slapped on it before it spread. Gold digger gets exposed by bigger gold digger. It went semi-viral locally. I didn't share it. I didn't comment. I just watched the fallout roll through my phone like distant thunder. That night, alone in my bed, the weight of everything finally settled. Not relief, grief. Because as much as he'd wronged me, as much as she'd used me, this wasn't a victory parade. It was the collapse of something ugly, and I'd been standing too close to the wreckage. I thought about the version of myself from months ago, the woman on the couch who thought love meant compromise, who believed transparency was optional if trust existed. I thought about how close I'd come to writing that check, $35,000. My future, my safety, my autonomy, gone. The realization hit me so hard I had to sit up, pressing my hand to my chest as if I could slow my heartbeat. This could have destroyed me, financially, emotionally, legally. And if I'd hesitated even a little longer, if I'd chosen peace over instinct again, it would have. That was the darkest part. Not what they did, but how easily I could have let it happen. I cried then, not loud, not dramatic. Silent tears, soaking into the pillow as I stared into the dark, mourning the woman I almost lost. The woman who trusted without protection. The woman who thought asking questions made her difficult. I whispered a promise into the empty room. Never again. Because whatever came next, whatever consequences still hadn't landed, I wasn't going to survive this by accident. I was going to survive it on purpose. 2 days after the video started circulating, a detective called me. His voice was calm, procedural, like this was just another file on his desk. To me, it felt like the final door swinging open. We're following up on the attempted credit application in your name, he said. There's something you should know. I sat down slowly. This isn't the first time your ex has done this, he continued. There was a similar incident 5 years ago. Same pattern, different boyfriend. My stomach dropped. She was given a warning back then. No charges. The other party didn't want to pursue it. I thought about how many people had quietly walked away instead of holding her accountable. How many times she'd learned that tears could erase consequences. I'm pressing charges, I said. My voice didn't shake. The detective exhaled softly. All right, we'll proceed. When the call ended, I felt something shift. Not outwardly, but deep in my chest. For the first time since this started, I wasn't reacting to damage. I was setting a boundary that couldn't be argued with. That afternoon, Bradley sent over one last update. The student loans she'd claimed were manageable had been in default for 3 years. The original $8,000 had ballooned to nearly $14,000 with penalties and interest. She hadn't just lied. She'd built a future on avoidance. That evening, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. This is her mother, the woman said. I just wanted to apologize. Her voice cracked on the last word. We talked for nearly an hour. She told me this wasn't new, that her daughter had been pulling variations of this scheme since college, that her family had cut her off financially years ago, that the ex and her had been tangled together since high school, a cycle neither of them seemed able or willing to break. She's being forced into therapy, her mother said. If she refuses, she's done with us. I listened quietly, my fingers tracing the grain of the table beneath me. She offered to pay me back for anything her daughter had taken. I declined. This wasn't about money anymore. The next morning, an email landed in my inbox. New address. Familiar tone. Subject. I hope you're happy. The message wasn't an apology. It was a list of losses. Her car, her housing, her friendships, her parents' disappointment, her ex's silence. All of it, she claimed, was my fault. If you'd just trusted me. If you just helped like a normal partner would. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed one sentence. Your ex's car loan was never my responsibility. Neither are you. I blocked the address. That was the moment I knew I'd taken my power back. Not when the truth came out. Not when the repo truck arrived. Not when the videos went viral. But when I stopped needing them to understand. Because closure doesn't come from being believed. It comes from believing yourself. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It rippled outward, quietly at first, then all at once, like a structure collapsing after the supports have already rotted through. A week after I pressed charges, I heard what happened to his friend. The email she'd sent from her work account, the one threatening legal action she knew didn't exist, had been taken seriously, very seriously. Using company resources to intimidate a private individual wasn't just unethical, it was actionable. She was suspended pending investigation. When the company's legal team asked her to substantiate the claims she'd made about common law marriage, palimony, coercion, she panicked. Tried to backtrack, claimed her email had been hacked. That made it worse, because now she wasn't just reckless. She was lying to investigators. Her lawyer cousin? Turns out he wasn't a lawyer at all, a paralegal. When contacted, he distanced himself immediately. Said he'd never advised her to send that email. Said she'd exaggerated. By the end of the month, she was terminated. I didn't celebrate, but I didn't feel guilty either. Consequences don't require applause. They just arrive. As for him, my ex, the unraveling was slower, more private. The kind that eats at someone from the inside out. Without my money cushioning his lifestyle, the gaps showed quickly. Bills piled up. His credit took hits he could no longer smooth over. He bounced between friends' couches, telling anyone who would listen that he'd been financially abused by a woman who turned cold the moment he needed help. Some believed him. Most didn't. People talk when patterns repeat. The criminal case moved forward. The detective kept me updated with evidence this clear. Documentation, attempted fraud, prior warning. There was no pretending this was a misunderstanding. She took a plea deal, probation, court-ordered therapy, restitution for my credit monitoring costs. It wasn't dramatic justice. It was real-world accountability. Her reputation didn't survive the process. Neither did his. The videos faded from feeds, replaced by newer scandals, but the damage stuck. Employers remember. Friends remember. Doors closed quietly. One afternoon, nearly 2 months later, I received a call from her mother again, just checking in, making sure I was okay. She moved back home, she said softly, working at her father's hardware store, therapy twice a week. I wished her well, and meant it, because holding on to anger would have tethered me to a story I was done living in. The BMW was auctioned. After the sale, there was still over $12,000 left on the loan. Combined with defaulted student loans and collections, her credit was effectively unrepairable for years. And him? Without the car, the symbol, the illusion, his successful image collapsed. Last I heard, he was trying to pitch business ideas to new girlfriends, promising returns, hinting at futures that sounded suspiciously familiar. Some people don't change. They just look for new hosts. As for me, the quiet returned. Not the false calm from before, but a grounded stillness built on clarity. I rearranged my apartment, took down photos, reclaimed space, relearned the sound of my own thoughts without someone else's narrative echoing over them. I started attending a financial literacy workshop, not because I needed it, but because I wanted to understand my power more deeply. Knowledge felt different now, protective, solid. That's where I met someone new. Nothing dramatic, no fireworks, just conversation that felt honest, respectful, unrushed. When the story came up, because it always does eventually, he didn't flinch, didn't joke, didn't try to fix it. He just said, "I'm glad you trusted your instincts." So was I. 3 months later, the story no longer felt sharp. It lived in my past like a scar you notice only when you run your fingers over it, proof of survival, not pain. Life settled into something quieter, cleaner. I woke up without bracing for conflict. I checked my phone without dread. My credit was frozen, my account secure, my space fully mine again. One afternoon, as I was leaving work, I got a notification on LinkedIn. A connection request. His name. The message read, "Hey, no hard feelings about everything. I'm starting a new venture and looking for investors. Thought I'd reach out." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I clicked ignore. Not because I was angry, because I was done. That's the thing people don't tell you about boundaries. You don't enforce them once. You enforce them every time you're tempted to reopen a door that should stay closed. I learned that love doesn't ask you to disappear. Commitment doesn't demand blindness. And anyone who says, "If you loved me, you wouldn't need proof," is asking you to fund their lies. The most dangerous manipulation doesn't come wrapped in cruelty. It comes wrapped in trust. I used to think being kind meant being accommodating. That generosity without questions was a virtue. That asking for clarity made me difficult. I know better now. Clarity is not cruelty. Questions are not accusations. And protecting yourself doesn't make you cold. It makes you responsible. The $1,500 I spent on that forensic accountant, best money I've ever spent. Not because it exposed a lie, but because it saved my future. So if you're listening to this and something in your gut feels off, if someone is asking you to prove love with money, silence, or sacrifice, pause. Ask for the paperwork. Ask the uncomfortable questions. And if they get angry, that's your answer. Because the right partner doesn't fear transparency. They build with it.